Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm Mark Schumacher, the CEO of the Home Furnishings Association, and this is one of our weekly webinars, a chance to dig into a subject matter and go deep on it so that you can really get some great insights. And today, we're talking about finding success in data-driven decisions, data being at the heart of it, really how data analytics can drive everything. And also, we're going to talk about how to collect it, how to analyze it, what some of the best practices are, and also going to get some great case studies as well. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Hope you are too. A little bit of housekeeping here real quick. I want to remind you that if you have a question, there is a Q&A tab at the bottom of this Zoom picture that you have there. Please put a question in there and we will do our best to get to it before we are done with this hour today. Also, this and every one of our webinars is in our library at myhfa.org/webinar. You can find everything there. So you'll be able to access this on demand, share it with people, which is always a great thing to be able to do. And I also, as always, want to thank Synchrony. They are our thought leaders when it comes to our education here, and they sponsor the education at HFA. So let's get down to it here. I want to introduce our panel who's joining us today. First of all, someone that's no stranger to this association, David McMahon, owner of Perform Now. He has a long track record of helping to grow sales, profits, ROI, you name it, for companies in our industry. And he's joined us many times on webinars. David, as always, it's great to have your expertise in the house. So thank you for being here. Jamie Winter is joining us. He actually wears two hats. First and foremost, owner of Furniture Mall of Kansas. So a retailer that certainly understands the consumer end of this discussion, but also he's the owner and founder of Tools to Win, and they provide a whole suite of point of sale data and information, et cetera. So Jamie, happy to have you here as well. And also joining us is Kevin Staples. He's a principal solution architect at Myers Holem. His specialty is really a lengthy experience in NetSuite implementation solution architecture. So we've got I always love it when we have a program like this. We've got more brain power from the three of you than I have. I'm definitely fourth in this whole thing, and that's good. That's a good thing. We always want to have that. So gentlemen, let me just start out with this because, it's always kind of hard to know with such a humongous subject like this, really kind of where to start. And here's what I'd like to just ask each one of you. And David, I'll start with you. Right now, if you were just to tell anybody, as if this question was asked, what do you think the most important, if you talk about the maybe two or three, what are the most important data points you think right now for a retail home furnishings business in our current environment? What would you say those two or three are?
Well, I'll just give you one for now. We can explore it further if you wish. But in a lot of our performance groups outside the ops groups, we've been talking about sales productivity. And we hear a lot of complaints or whatever in the industry about lower traffic, which is to be expected. We heard Todd Wanick saying that on the webinar last week that demand was pulled in the last couple of years, but sales productivity is what you can close today, plus the follow-up that you have for tomorrow to hopefully get more traffic and close more in the future. It's how well you do with your customers that you have now. So that would be the one that I would be encouraging people.
And I want to dig more into that in a minute, but that's a great one. Good start. Jamie, what do you think?
Yeah, so I would agree with David that to me the number one that's on top of everybody's mind today from a retail standpoint is traffic. Everybody's struggling with reduced traffic across the country. So really what that means is that every person that walks in your door becomes that much more important. And really you've got to focus on growing your close rate. You've got to focus on growing your average sale with every single guest that comes in the door. Because right now you've got less opportunities than you've had for several years. So that's really the focus of most retailers right now, and really where we're focusing our efforts is how do we grow close rate, how do we grow average sale due to the reduced traffic.
And I think it's fair to say, and you can feel free to disagree, but I think we need to realize that reduced traffic is probably going to be something that's going to be around for a while and has been. So it's not like there's going to be some crazy boost in the next few weeks that's going to change that. So I think you're absolutely right. What would you say, Kevin, that you feel is maybe the top one or two important data points right now?
Yeah, so I'll think of this like, obviously, I think both Jamie and David, great insights, especially like on the customer facing side. I'm going to think a little more on the operational side. I think one is really understanding your true fully baked landed cost. I think a lot of folks, especially, we saw so much supply chain disruption, right? Over COVID, right? Is really understanding what is the true cost of goods sold, right? Obviously, that's going to include, what you're paying your vendors for goods, but also, what are the freight, what are the customs, what are those unexpected costs? So really being able to zero in on exactly what that cost is. That's one. And then the second big thing I'm seeing a lot of, especially, is, as folks are trying to optimize on spend and cost, is really having insight into your supply chain and kind of looking at like materials resource planning and saying, okay, how do I optimize, how do I look at what my demand is? How do I then optimize it to my purchases and be able to make sure that, you're not potentially holding too much inventory. You're not being at risk of not being able to meet your customer needs in terms of demand.
And, and it's interesting. I do want to point out, and we will get to this in this next hour, but, we're not just talking about front of house. We're also talking about the back room as far as how these data points. You just hit it right there with what you said, Kevin, as far as supply chain, inventory, things like, there's all aspects that we can adapt. But I want to go with the flow of the conversation with where you guys took us. David, talk a little bit, break down for me a little bit more for all of us, the sales productivity piece. What goes into that, and how you're really analyzing that. Can we drill down a little bit further? Because that's
sure. I'll give you an example of 10 customers for, okay. So on average, you're going to close, just say you close 3 of them. 3 people buy of those 10. Okay, there you go. You got a 30% close, right?
Okay.
So the question is, and of that 30%, 10 probably would have bought anyways if no one was there. But
right.
Anyways, you have 7 people left over. So 70%, right? So what do you do with that 70%? These are people who visited your operation physically. Okay. So what are you going to do with that? You spend advertising dollars for them to come in, or, there's some reason why they came in. So what are you going to do with that? That's really the productivity part. And to measure it, it's really capturing, you need to know their name. You need to have a point of contact, email and or cell phone. And let's just say you got 2 of those 7. So that would be, that would bring you to a 50% productivity. You see that? So it's close plus the follow-up. The next step is actually doing the follow-up, but you have to get the follow-up first.
Okay, but it sure does, because you're what I love what you're saying is, so you're taking that snapshot of who's already coming in the store before we even kind of branch it out from there. So Jamie, it makes sense to go over to you now and say, okay, so let's go with what David's saying. So you've got a 30% close rate. How are you going after those additional 70, or making sure that you have the ability to follow up with that 70% that did not transact?
Yeah, so we're tracking what we call an impact rate. So really kind of the same thing Dave is talking about, but out of those 10 guests that walked in the door, what is our percentage of our ability to impact those 10? So in David's example, if we sold 3, that's great. So that we have a 30% close rate. But then if we got another 2 or 3 people's information that we can follow up and work on that process to grow the sales by following up, then we would count that as our impact rate. So if we got 3 sales and 2 people's information to follow up, we would say we had a 50% impact rate. And so we start to track that across all of our different salespeople and really encourage the ability, man, if we can't sell it today, we've got to schedule it. That's Jody Seiferd's, whole training plan is sell it or schedule it. And if we can't get it closed today, we've got to schedule the next appointment and make sure we've got some way to follow up to do that.
Yeah, I was just writing an article for one of the magazines. I said, today's follow-up is tomorrow's traffic.
So. Yes, very true.
100%. And I've always basically said that, you're also with those customers that you did land, your first moment of retention is when that sale closes. You know what I'm saying? So this is a cycle. There's no gaps, if you will. Kevin, let me ask you a question. So we're talking here about, with both of they've called it something different, when one said impact rate, sales productivity, but in both cases, since this is a data conversation, we're talking about the desperate need for the data on those that did not print on those let's just call it 50% that's on the outside. So what are some of the best practices right now to ensure that you've got that data to be able to now properly follow up or at least have a chance at them again?
Yeah, so I think, a lot of this, and, I think I was thinking about this today. I was on site with a client, very different industry than furniture, but the whole discussion we had about working with their sales folks was saying, how do we make sure that we have a easy, systemic way for folks to get potential contacts and leads and even failed sales into a system, right? I think that's the first thing I think about a lot is like, how do we make sure we're systematizing, potential customers? So I think that's one thing I'm thinking about a lot is like, how to make those processes simple. And the other big thing I'm thinking about a lot too is like, how do we, especially with the customers we need to follow up with, how do we think about the time and money we're leveraging to put in to actually, track that? Because I always come back to, I know like CAC is such an important, metric, right? And it's like us making sure we can easily understand, if we launch a marketing campaign, right, to those likely customers, what do we spend to do that? And then we can start to understand, what our overall kind of customer lifetime value is, right? Because you talked about retention, right? Like how do we, what are the customers, what kinds of customers are, coming back to us and buying more? And then for those customers who didn't buy the first time, we want to start to understand and track what are we spending to kind of potentially bring them in, and understanding, can we group and categorize those customers who maybe we had to fight for and understand what is the long-term value we're getting out of them.
So, appreciate that. So here's my question, because one of the things that we always see on the webinars, and I get it, everybody is trying to literally pinch every dollar they've got. Sure. David, the one thing that's interesting is we always talk about these things, and everybody thinks there's a huge price tag to collect or to analyze this data. Can we just talk initially about, I mean, how much of this is right at most retailers' fingertips already, rather than even looking outside? I mean, is it a question of also just maximizing the information that you have right under your nose at the moment? And if so, what are some thoughts about the best ways to do that? Because, I think that a lot of times we put a little bit too much on a quick fix, realizing that you've got data right at your fingertips.
Well, I mean, every system will record a sale, but outside of that, if you have to use a spreadsheet or a handwritten piece of paper or a CRM or something, you need some ability to capture and track the information of who comes in that doesn't buy, to follow up with. I mean, the challenge is it needs to be managed too. So it's hard to manage with pieces of paper. So you need some sort of, to manage properly, you need some sort of a digital system in order to execute some follow-up. And if you have a good system, you can tie in some automated follow-up too, to assist the salespeople. Like one thing some people are doing, and NetSuite does this as well as other systems, is you can, for those that buy or don't buy, you can automate a text that goes to the customer saying a relevant message, or an email, and that could come from the salesperson. So, salespeople should follow up as well themselves, but you can use systems to combine automation and task scheduling and different things like that. But if you have nothing, put it on a piece of paper in a form. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That's
my thoughts.
I appreciate that. That's why we have you here, for your thoughts, by the way. Jamie, can you give us some examples of how you guys have successfully grabbed that data from people that have come into your stores? What have you found to be successful? This is everybody wants to tap in on some best practices here. What are you guys finding is your best practice at this?
Yeah, I would say, every point of sale system collects a lot of data. So long as you got a point of sale system, you've got a host of data. And it's really a matter of just getting that data out and into a format that really helps you make decisions and be able to be useful. And as David said, you can write names on a piece of paper and phone numbers and so forth, which work great, but you can spend, half your job tracking and entering data into spreadsheets and so forth, which instead of really focusing on closing those customers or focusing on making improvements every day, you end up spending so much time collecting and entering data to where you're just wasting so much time and you never get to the implementation. It becomes very difficult. So we really believe, automating solutions is critical in order to really allow these busy retailers and owners that really have no time to do anything, that they've just got to focus on what's most important for their time, which is really implementing improvements and fixes. And if they're spending so much time and their sales manager is spending time in the office keying in data into spreadsheets instead of being out on the floor helping to close sales, then we're missing the point.
You're not selling. Exactly. Kevin, I see you doing a lot of nodding. What do you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, no, I think Jamie is right on. I think the big thing with this I think about a lot is seamless integrations between the right platforms to make this possible, right? So I think, as David said, and Jamie, you get a lot of great information from the point of sale system, right? Other thing is making sure you have a seamless, easy way for your sales folks to enter in new leads, ideally like on a cell phone or a tablet, right? And then it's important that, maybe, obviously I'm biased, you're using NetSuite, let's say. You entered a new lead, then it's like, okay, how are we making sure quickly that gets passed to another relevant platform for potential outreach, right? So maybe it's like we have a great integration between NetSuite and Klaviyo is running all your email marketing, right? And it's just about kind of easily and quickly being able to move data between systems so folks can act. I think that's one thing whenever I'm thinking about, the best run businesses that I see are folks who know what the right platform is for what they need to do, and making sure that their right platforms are integrated seamlessly. That way, then you're not experiencing data loss. You're not having folks, keying into one spreadsheet and supposed to link to another spreadsheet, and suddenly you have a broken formula.
Okay. I'm going to throw this is kind of playing into what we just talked about. I'm going to throw this out here and just let whoever wants to jump in. But while it's, we want all these data points, right? When it comes to that customer that's come through the door, and I get it. But how do you ensure that the data analytics you're using, the way that you're using it, personalizes the customer experience? Because we know, especially in these last few years, how critical that customer experience is. So I'll toss that out to anybody who wants to jump in first. But how do you make sure that it's more personalized and not just pieces of data you're stringing together and data points?
Are we talking about, I guess with personalization, you're meaning messages going to a prospect or a customer?
Because I think the concern is always, you can have this storehouse of content information and data, but we know that the personalized experience, in Jamie's stores, people want to come back in, and you want them to come back in because they feel that connection.
I'll try not to be too techie, but I'll answer it the best I can. Okay.
Okay. Go for it.
The terminology is called workflow automation. Okay. And basically what you do, and workflow automation is like the result of something that is triggered if something happens. Mm-hmm. So basically I'll give you an example. You might want to send a after delivery survey or a next purchase question to somebody who just got delivered. So you predefine the workflow and what you're going to say, and it's like a mail merge, so it's addressed to the customer, but the trigger is the delivery date. So you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's like in the old school world, before we had email marketing, stuff like that, people used to send mailers, and we still get them in the mail, and it's addressed to ourselves. But that's just because it's a merge. So you can do the same thing with data via text or email, but through a workflow that's defined, but something has to trigger it. So there's software and management of that to make it happen. Was I too tacky?
No, I actually had workflow automation on my question list. So you let me check one of them off. What were you going to say, Kevin?
Yeah. And I was going to say, David, I think you're right on with that, right? And I think the other thing too is thinking about what are kind of key customer categorizations you wanted to note on potential leads or opportunities. Another big thing, right, is like, okay, what area of furniture is this person looking to purchase, right? It's like, okay, this person's really interested in a couch, right? This other person is interested in like beds, right? Just, and it's being able to see if you can quickly denote and define categories. That way, then when you enter leads, you can quickly categorize them in a certain area. And another big thing, especially when you're maybe entering a potential opportunity, someone on the floor, even if they're not going to buy, if you can denote what item they're looking at, that then gives you a lot more powerful data than you can follow up on, right? And it's about being as, I think it's like trying to be as broad as possible, but also judicious. And this is like, again, getting a little techie here, but I always tell my customers, when you're trying to categorize data, make sure you're actually categorizing from a list. Please do not go ahead and freeform enter data, because any freeform enter data you cannot follow up on, right? Because otherwise it's not useful. You have an N of 1 versus we're trying to figure out like what is the broadest yet specific enough categories we can put things into so we can start to actually action and like utilize that workflow that David's talking about.
So Jamie, since we're, I want to get you to weigh in on this too, because, you know, one of the goals we had of this webinar was to not only talk about collecting and analyzing, but implementing. And this is, we've gotten to an implementation question here. So how do you guys try to make sure that your utilization of this data does come across as being personal for that customer, to make sure that experience really rings true?
Yeah, so I can provide an example of exactly what we're doing with personalization. And really has to do with trigger emails and trigger direct mail. And so once a customer buys, we kind of know what their next purchase should be, or what they're probably looking for. So for example, if a customer comes in and buys a bedroom set and they did not buy a mattress, they're most likely shopping for a mattress. They're not shopping it right when they bought the bedroom set. A few weeks later, once they get the bedroom set in their home, they're most likely looking for a new mattress. And so if we have a customer that does that, they purchased a bedroom set but did not purchase a mattress, we will send them a personalized coupon for a mattress discount to really start to drive that decision and move forward. And another example would be, you know, if they bought any type of upholstery or motion set, but didn't buy any accessories. They didn't buy the rug. They didn't buy occasional set. They didn't buy any lamps. You know, we will send them a coupon for a discount off of accessories to really start to drive and help with that next decision that they're focused on.
Gotcha. Appreciate that. And I appreciate the examples. Anytime you guys want to jump in with a case study, please do that. Before we get away from the one area that we just kind of touched on a second ago, relating to, you know, having some sort of an automated aspect of this data collection and usage of the data. You know, there's a question that came up from folks that signed up, and a few people asked about it. There's a concern, and maybe it's not a you know, a concern that you might all dispel this, but and I'll toss this one out to whoever wants to handle it. You know, there's a concern about the fact, well, I've got an old system, or I've got an old school way of collecting this, and we talked about paper and things like that. Is that a big deal, or are there ways to just make sure that you're extracting information out of an old system when you do upgrade to something that's more sophisticated and upgraded? Because I think a lot of people have this. It seems like there's a little bit of a fear there, right?
If you don't,
go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to go away from your old system because you're comfortable and you don't want the cost and all that, there's the main thing is that you're able to integrate with other tech out there. Okay.
Describe that for us, is when you say.
Well, I mean, I don't want to, you know, just say it's an old POS system or one, whatever. There's that. It's probably good at what it does for your business. However, there might be something newer with a lot of bells and whistles that programs could talk to each other in some fashion, that you can get what you're looking for by integrating. I'll just say, leave it like that.
and integration
Yes.
can mean a lot of things too, right? So that could be as simple as, like, if it's a really old system, maybe it can go ahead and generate a flat file, stick that in the FTP, and that could be picked up by a more modern system, right? Or, you know, it could be an API connection. But I think, to David's point, it's just also about like thinking about what is your overall like systems architecture and landscape, and identifying, okay, you love your old POS system, it's got some very specific things that makes your team's life easy. That's not a problem. Just make sure you're kind of identifying what the other connected systems are in kind of your overall architecture that can be helpful in kind of taking that maybe core customer data and actually making things a little more actionable.
And Jamie, I'm going to assume that at one point you guys had older systems. You know, we don't always start out at the sophisticated level on square one. What have you guys done to blend those things together, or perhaps other people you've worked with? What have you seen have been the successful ways to do that?
Well, that's really, this whole topic is really about what Tools to Win is about. So we do a lot of integrations with older systems and with newer systems to provide that integration. So working directly with some of these legacy point of sale systems, integrating with some of the new CRMs like Perform Now that David has, integrating with websites to automatically upload all of your items, all of your pricing, your stock status, being able to do that with systems and point of sale systems that don't talk to anybody. And so we're kind of that integrator that helps those systems to talk together.
And I guess I guess the sort of the underlying answer there is also the fact that, yes, if you refer to the legacy systems, if you have these things, it not all is lost. You're not starting from square one. And any information you've collected is valuable data, right? I mean, let's get that straight, because that's the thing. I think there's a lot of people that probably have done a great job of collecting key contact information, just not in a sophisticated system. But I wanted to make sure that we're talking about that. So one follow-up here, because again, this is always a question that comes up. So what I hear you all saying is, if I have a limited budget, it doesn't mean that I can't sort of not just dip my toes in, but get into the pool here when it comes to much more sophisticated data analytics. Thoughts about that? I just want to make sure that we dispel that, because budget is always, and especially right now in our economic situation, that's key.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my feeling on budgets, I mean, it's really what value the expense is going to get you. I mean, I believe any business in any state needs to have something in their budget to invest in innovation and their future, and that may involve training and systems and different things like that. But without investing for your future, and if your competitors are, one day you're going to get behind. If you need more in your budget, you should look at the biggest expense in your business, which is, in my opinion, cost of goods sold.
That.
Yes.
Jamie, any thoughts on that as well? Because I think this is an important point, though. I mean, we understand budgets are tight, but David's opinion is you're going to have to spend to make a difference in this area of data usage and analysis.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of retailers are concerned about investing in some of the advancements and new innovations. But you got to look at what you're spending today and what you're missing today. I mean, you add up all the hours that your sales managers spending in the office keying in data or trying to collect data instead of helping close sales. I mean, if he can help close a few more sales, it's much more valuable than sitting in an office keying in data. And if we can, spend a little bit of money to get that all automated, then, he can get the best of both worlds. He has the data, as well as he can spend the time on the floor to implement and make the improvements. And, just as we've been talking about, with collecting all these leads and so forth, and if you don't have a process and a system around that makes it easy to track and follow up and so forth, just missing a few of those is extremely costly to your business. And it's easy to forget about that cost that just is gone. You don't even know you missed it. Mm-hmm. And so investing in the technology to grow that and make some of that automated and be able to be trackable is usually well worth the investment.
I think you got to push, push Jamie, push David, push me to show you the return on investment on the software, right? I think, that's a fair question to ask, but I think it's folks should be willing to kind of understand, okay, what if I can, go on Jamie's example, if I can give my sales manager back 4 hours a day from manually entering data, how can the sales manager use that time to kind of generate more sales, right? Like, what does it look like if I put in software and, better understand my lead times, right?
Right.
Like, how much money can I spend? How much money can I save by, maybe more easily being able to hit minimum order quantities? Is that going to kind of Is that going to save me money? So I think it's about understanding kind of and forcing, people like Jamie, David, and me to give you exact numbers and say, hey, in your procurement process, I think you're going to find these efficiencies, and this is the potential return on that, right?
So you're saying, I just want to make sure I'm hearing you, because I think I am here. So you're basically saying for anybody listening to this that wants to engage any entity when it comes to this type of data, capturing, analysis, utilization, et cetera, you're saying upfront, get an idea about what you're buying into here, and what the possible returns are and where those areas are. Because the other thing too, and I think you guys are going to probably amen section on this comment that I'm going to make, because I'm hearing this and what you're talking about, is that also this is not a set it and forget it, right? This is not find a solution and then you take your hands off the wheel. I hear Jamie, you in particular, saying you better have, if you do make this investment that David's suggesting you make and you guys are suggesting you make, you better make sure that your team is also feeding into it, that the practices are, that it's good information going in and they're utilizing it coming out. Would you agree with that, Jamie? Because if you're going to make the investment, you can't just, like I said, set it and forget it. You've got to really stay on it and have it be part of your culture.
Absolutely. It's got to be ingrained into your decision making, and your processes can change and improve based on, the different pieces of automation that it can exist with some technology investment. So yeah, you've got to get that time back and make it useful.
Yeah.
So
whether it's a new process, or whether it's some training you do, or whether it's some sort of software innovation, whatever it is, it's only going to work if you execute day in, day out. I don't care what it is. It could be a simple tweak to your selling system or the way you do it. But if you only do it once, forget about it.
Yeah, you got to commit.
Exactly.
I'm with
whatever
you.
the thing is, consistency is what makes things work.
Yeah. And I think it's also that, every software project in my mind, right? Obviously, a part of it is implementing the new technology, but the other huge part is change management, right? And that if you're going to be successful in implementing new software, it's all about, getting the key stakeholders in the room to understand what their requirements are, demoing them, their requirements, getting walkthrough, and then, doing intense user acceptance testing with the software, using end user training, because it's a cultural change.
That's buy-in, and the other part of it too is, and I'm thinking about like David, excuse me, on Jamie, on your floor, I'm assuming it's one of those things too. If they realize that those little couple of nuggets of information that they glean extra from that customer that came in, or that potential customer that came in, that's the gold, man. That's your warm lead going forward, no doubt about it. I've got a hot question that came in off the presses here. It says, and anybody that wants to answer this, how do you feel about having someone on staff analyze the data? It says, is it as important as having some of your legacy staff, et cetera, do that? So I think that maybe there's a little bit of question here about, the analysis point. Is that something that you feel should be in-house, out-of-house, combination of both? What do you guys think?
I really think that
Jenny.
if you can focus on your strengths and where you're at, most retailers, their strengths are the sales process or the inventory management and so forth. So using your staff internally to really drive that I think is probably better use of your time, and let some of the outside experts, do some of the data automation for you. Because once you analyze in-house, there are some people that can do that very well, and there are some that aren't. That's not their expertise. And if it is their expertise and then you lose that employee, now you get to start all over again with the next employee. So it becomes very difficult to manage that and keep consistent with what information you're getting.
Yeah, and there might be some orthodoxies in-house that might also come to play there and taint that analysis a little bit. Go ahead, David.
I'll just add on to Jamie's thing. Analysis is great, but somebody who can execute and lead a team, that's what really makes a difference. And if you don't have somebody on staff like that, and you find somebody, then that could turn into gold. But it's executing what you analyze and leading your team. That makes all the difference.
Yeah, we often find that, the folks who end up being the best users of a new system are the folks in-house who are interested in it, and those folks who are executing the best, right? Like, obviously there are some instances where it does make sense to hire a system expert, but oftentimes you can hire the system experts externally to consult and kind of build out good processes for you. And then as long as you push them, and I think, to provide adequate documentation and training, that then, you'll find that your kind of like sales leaders will start to pick it up, and then they'll be the ones who are driving the change. And that's kind of a more efficient use investment rather than just hiring someone to be a sales specialist, a data specialist.
Fair. What are the and I'll start out, David, with you this time. What are the top KPIs? You talk about this data we're gathering. What do you think the top KPIs are right now that everybody should be tracking? What are those?
Okay.
What are those?
Well, I've already mentioned the productivity. Okay, so
Right.
Of course you have to have the parts of the sales equation, traffic, average sale, close rate, and all that. But I've always been a big believer in gross margin, okay, or cost of goods as well. Tracking those things, minimizing cost of goods, maximizing margin, and you can break that down into like 10 things if you want. The other thing, cash flow. So the biggest things that affect cash flow are profitability and inventory levels and customer deposits. So I would have a good handle on those three things. Okay.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean,
Jamie, what do you think?
How many did you want?
No, that's good.
Yeah.
So I'll bring up one that we haven't talked about yet on the call, which is really inventory management and getting that inventory down. Because many, if you're a retailer right now and you have a line of credit against your inventory, you're paying 8 to 8.5% interest on every piece of inventory you buy. So right now it is so critical in the reorder process to make sure you're not over ordering, but you're ordering what's right and it's really going to grow your sales is critical. And then getting rid of all of anything you have in the warehouse that's not turning. Some of that inventory you bought during COVID that now is way overpriced. You paid $20,000 for that container. Wow, that product's not worth that anymore. It's just not.
No.
And so you're going to have to take a loss on some of that product. But you've got to be able to utilize that, and really, man, if you're going to mark something off 40% or 50% off to really get rid of some of that overpriced inventory, advertising that, driving that, and using it as a traffic driver can help eliminate, the pain of selling stuff at cost. And some of that's just going to have to happen right now.
And Jamie, it's interesting too, because, that's a huge pain point. And while a lot of times we talk about, quote unquote data in home furnishings retail, we always do think of, front of the house, but this back room thing, I mean, David mentioned cost of goods, et cetera. We've now kind of stepped into a different area here. Also, I think supply chain management is a part of this as well. So when we're talking about data to this overall audience, we need to let them understand that it goes across every aspect of their business. Kevin, I saw you nodding your head. You want to weigh in on that? Because I think that's important. It's not just the sales customer data that we're talking about as being critical here right now.
Yeah, I think some, building on kind of Jamie's point about, understanding where your inventory is, obviously it's going to depend on each individual retailer, but I think one thing that we're finding a lot of value for folks from an integration and data perspective is integrating to, freight forwarders and whatnot to bring that information into ERP so folks can understand, okay, I put out a purchase order to my vendor. If they're putting it on a container, getting live updates on that container and understanding, where it is on the water, and better understanding at a granular level. Let's say you have one PO that gets split across 5 containers, right? Where each individual container is, what the actual expected date is. And then also, depending on which freight forwarder you're using, you can also get better insight into landed cost, right? And that then gives you a better sense of what your, when you actually sell goods, right, what that actual gross margin is. So I think that's a really key thing for folks to kind of understand better from both an inventory planning and cost perspective is understanding, goods on the water.
Yeah, and Jamie hit on something really critical here too. That's been an added complexity the last couple of years is you have inventory in your warehouse that came in at a container price of $20,000 a container and some that came in at $2,000. I mean, we're
Right.
talking about a delta that is unbelievable. And you got to know, talking about the cost of goods and everything, you've got to know all those nuances. So David, I mean, are we kind of really hitting on what you were talking about with the cost of goods being so important about this is why backroom data gathering and management is, I mean,
Well,
critical.
it's the biggest expense on the P&L, of course, cost of goods sold. I mean, so you constantly want to be digging into that to grow gross margin, right? Or finding ways to grow gross margin to minimize cost of goods sold, depending on how you look at it. So, I mean, it's very important to continually look at pricing of bestsellers, when to drop things, how you do your promotions to maximize your margin, selling protection to maximize your margin. The list goes on and on, but anything that increases gross margin adds to profitability. Anything that decreases your inventory costs adds to profitability. So it's a constant battle day in, day out, and you need some analytics to make that happen.
So Jamie, what I'm hearing David say is that it's not just checking what the guy across the street is his price is on a comparative item. You've got to use all of this data you just talked about in your pricing strategies as well, right? I mean, you even talked about trying to get that flow through inventory through the warehouse, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because once again, another really critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the pricing of as David mentioned, the pricing of your best sellers is going to drive the majority of your margin for your whole company. So making sure that's accurate and correct and maximized to take advantage of margin opportunities when you can. I think that's critical. But if you look at the industry wide in terms of margin percent across the industry, it's been dropping the last really 12 to 18 months, and that's a lot of it due to this overpriced inventory. And there's got to be some pain here to get through that and be able to get back into a real merchandising strategy. We went, everybody in this industry went from 2 years worth of, instead of buying and merchandising, we were really beggars. We were calling every manufacturer we could, do you have anything in stock that I can get? And I didn't care what the price was, ship it, and we did that for 2 years. And it takes a lot of cleanup after 2 years of buying that way. And now we're really getting back to really wanting to have merchandising and focused on margin and everything. And it's a complete switch to what we did, for 2 years.
And Kevin, I want you to chime in on one aspect of what Jamie just said, and that is that, yes, all of this is really super critical now because of all of these challenges that we have. Yet these practices are things that are going to, you got to get your house in order now, because even if things increase, you're still going to want to have this type of system in place. This is not something that's just for the hard times, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about, like we understand margin is obviously a huge challenge. And I think it's also, putting in place checks and balances in your internal organization, ideally that can be systematized, that help fix these, or not fix, but help guide you in these areas. So I think one thing is I always go back to is like, how can we focus in on doing better demand planning to understand, what our supply is, so we can have a more optimized supply chain. Obviously that's going to be huge. And another big thing is, it sounds simple, but I always think about it is approvals, right? Is, being able to understand, okay, because I've set up my SKUs in my ERP system, again, ideally NetSuite, I know what my ideal selling price is, right? And understanding, based on my estimated landed cost as well as my purchase price, I should be able to know before my procurement team releases the purchase order, I should know exactly what that expected gross margin is, right? And making sure, you're holding your team accountable to maintaining a certain gross margin percentage, and that, like, hey, if we're below our expected gross margin, we need an approval. We need to understand why, and being able to just better track and kind of keep the lid on that, rather than just, getting away from, as Jamie, you were saying, I'll pay whatever, right? How do we put in place good kind of business rules so we're not paying whatever, and in the cases where we are paying whatever, we understand why, there's good documentation, and there's a clear approval process.
Okay. Awesome. Love that. I got a question that came in, and David, I'll let you handle this one. It's a question and kind of a statement. It says, when trying to find return on investment, everybody seems to have a different idea on what that return should be. It's making it hard to determine the true risk of spending on an advancement here. It's like maybe more of a comment than a statement. Do you have a reaction to that?
Well, okay. When there's an ROI formula that everybody knows, how, what's the return, I mean, how much you make and divided by how much you're spending. Okay. Sure. But then there's also, that's more of like an accounting equation or something like that. My thoughts sometimes, though, with technology and innovation is what's your opportunity cost of not doing something, Okay. So okay. I believe.
So
I believe there's
are you okay with standing pat?
Yeah, I believe this industry's slow. Okay, it's old. I mean, you can look to almost any other industry on what's going on and say, what are they doing that we're not doing? The road is already there. I mean, look to the auto industry, look to the jewelry industry. Mm-hmm. I mean, some people in this industry are more innovative than others. Right. But if you want to know the future of this industry, all you have to do is look at what's going on in other industries.
Yep. And we just had a major conference, and we had brought in people from different industries, and the chief revenue officer for Discount Tire, $9 billion company that's innovated like crazy over the last 3 years, came in, and there's nothing that they've done that isn't steeped in some really great data gathering analysis, and that's, I mean, it's driven everything. So I guess my answer to that, not that I was asked the question, is you're right, David. How can you afford not to at this point? Absolutely. You can't
look, the people cost is not getting any cheaper. It's always 100%. Been the biggest complaint of everything. Oh, how do I find good people? I mean, low unemployment rate, costs are going up. Well, I don't know, have the magic formula to figure that one out, but I do know that there's ways to augment the people cost a little bit.
100%.
I would go further and say too, if you want to keep the best sales folks, right, you want to provide them with an environment where they are easily can enter, utilize, and make use of good tools, right? So that's another kind of opportunity cost, is like, you don't want turnover because your tools are old and folks feel like they're losing time manually entering data into spreadsheets.
You mean data can be a retention tool? What? Yeah. Who knew? So Jamie, I'm going to throw this one at you, and you may not have an answer for it, but I love it when we get questions sometimes that are kind of backhanded. And this is what this question said. What sources of data that provide the best insights are home furnishing retailers not using? Right. So now we're kind of flipping it this way. Do you think, I guess, let me ask it the way I would. What would you say to the audience are some of the low hanging fruit of data insights that are right there that they're just not utilizing? Maybe it's a thing that they're just not seeing and they're ignoring. Do you have an answer for that? I'm just curious, because I think it's a good one.
Yeah, and kind of goes along with the return on investment deal. I really feel that, every room group you have on your showroom floor is an investment, and you need to be able to track your return on that. And, whether or not, you want to compare to an industry data, what's really more important is comparing to yourself. Are you getting better every day? And being able to track that and understand that is very important. So just as an example of tracking a room group, it sounds so simple, right? You just, you got one room group on the floor, and you just want to track the sales of that and understand if it's turning and whether or not you want to change it or leave it. That becomes very complicated when you start throwing in special orders. So now you have this upholstery group. You're showing it as a sofa and love seat on the floor, but you're special ordering it as a sectional. You're special ordering it in a different fabric. You're special ordering it, whatever. And it becomes very complicated to track the return on that simple room group that you have on your showroom floor. So I think that type of data of really looking at return based on frame or based on a collection becomes very, very important to making merchandising decisions. And we work with new clients all the time that are just missing that whole analysis to understand what that slot is really bringing them back in terms of total margin dollars when they look at all the special orders, because most point of sale systems in our industry do a very poor job of being able to pull all the special orders and stock orders together that one slot is bringing back to you.
Interesting. So you're, I'm kind of hearing you saying, they're just maybe not going granular enough when it comes to at least that sales data. Is that, am I oversimplifying it?
You can see like what a specific SKU is turning, in every point of sale system, but I want to see what the whole collection is, including
Gotcha.
the different color that I ordered based on the showroom sample. So, that data is there, it's in your point of sale system. And a lot of people are really missing pulling all that data together and looking at it from a total frame standpoint.
Huge takeaway. Absolutely love that. Especially now when we're seeing that, we know the tickets are larger, less foot traffic, but larger tickets. That just fits in exactly what you're talking about. Love that. Kevin, yes. I saw you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jamie's got a great point there. It's all about, like item master relationships, right? Understanding what is composed of an order, like, so you can better understand, right? And this, it also can be very helpful from a planning perspective, right? So how things can break down or not break down, and you realize that, as Jamie said, okay, one piece of this sectional is selling great. Okay, what does that mean for, like, how does that factor into our demand of the overall sectional? How do we make the right decisions there? And a lot of that is about, setting up your systems correctly, being able to kind of break down finished goods into their components and stuff like that. And that's what really kind of influences how you run MRP and stuff like that.
Gotcha. And David, what do you think is maybe a insightful chunk of data that folks are not taking advantage of that's really at their fingertips? Or anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, I don't know. I'll just kind of give you my perspective when I visit with a new
Please.
Consulting client or something like that. I always want to make sure that we set aside time to start high level, okay, and then dig in. So I see a lot of people in the industry not setting aside that time to take a big picture view of their business, and then asking themselves, okay, where do we need to dig in? So, and it might go down, you might find yourself down that path leading you to frame analysis or whatever. But, I think it's very worthwhile for everybody to get to, the leadership team, most people have leadership teams to get together. Are we selling as much furniture as we expect to be selling? Are we selling it for the right gross margin? Are our expenses right? Are our inventory right? And if any of those things are out of line, then let's set aside some time to dig in. So, just focus on the big picture, then dig in, I think is very important. That's how I conduct my deals anyways.
Love it. No, I think it's very insightful. The question came in, and Jamie, I'll let you start on this one. It said, how do you get salespeople to adapt to this newer technology? It says so many are resistant to change. How do you inspire those people with this, data collection technology, et cetera, that has become so critical? So how do you get the buy-in?
Oh, that's a great question. So you've got to be able to cast the vision that your salespeople are seeing the benefit. And a lot of times that people are, just give one example, that some retailers are entering tickets, back in the office. And so they work with a customer selects, what they want to purchase, and the salesperson, goes away for 15 minutes while they enter the ticket, and you're missing that whole opportunity of sitting with the customer and, maybe tweaking that order or working with them to make sure it's all right. If you have an iPad and you're entering the ticket on an iPad, you can sit there on the sofa with your guest and enter the ticket and continue the dialogue and ensure that you've got a happy customer at the end of the day. So I think you've got to be able to show, I'm bringing in this new technology for this reason. It's going to give us this benefit, and it's going to be a better experience for our guests.
And Kevin, I have a feeling since you deal a lot with implementation and things of that sort, that this is not a foreign subject to you either.
Yeah, I think it's like one is like talking to folks, and I think when you talk to folks, the big thing is focusing on like what do you want to get out of a new system? And I think a big thing, and I want to differentiate between is there's a big difference between asking someone, describe your current process to me. Oftentimes, when I'm being honest, when I'm implementing software, I don't really care what your current process is. I care about what your need, what you want to get out of it. Because then
Mhm.
oftentimes you then are hearing, well, like I go into this room, I ring this bell, it then shoots out this, and it's like it's some kind of asinine process that's not really helpful. But if we can have people feel like they've been heard, we can then demo to them something that seems easier, faster, and more simplistic, right? And then being able to make sure that as we're, doing testing and training, folks are super involved. They feel like their feedback is heard. That is what I find really successful for implementation, right? And the other big thing I think is being able to show them to Jamie's point, uh easy kind of value adds, like as you said, you're sitting on the couch with them, you're putting in their order quickly, and have a software that has some intelligent recommendations and says, hey, you know what, just so you know, like we actually have a deal. When you buy this sectional, you can get an extra set of pillows for 15% off, right? And being able to have the software help you make those suggestions, or say, oftentimes folks who bought this sectional uh have bought this other thing, right? And that obviously can be, to David's earlier point, that could be part of a additional workflow email in the future, but it also could be on the point upsell.
Awesome. We have just a couple of minutes, and I just wanted to leave these last couple of minutes to this question. And David, I'm going to start with you. Do you have off the top of your head, you don't need to name names, but do you have just a case study that you can think of about how an entity that you've worked with has found just some great success by really paying attention to this whole concept of data collection, analysis, and utilization? Can you give us kind of a case study to help us sort of put a bow on this conversation today?
Well, I'll give you some personal outside of the industry that I thought that sparked to me what I think should be people should think about within this industry. Okay, so I was searching the Home Depot site, just browsing around. I didn't even know they sold furniture, and that was the extent of it. 2 days later, in the mail, I got a brochure from Home Depot with a discount code. Okay, how did that happen? They somehow knew I was on their website, knew what I was searching around for, targeted me directly, and sent me an addressed mailer. I know how they did it, but anyhow, that's what we're up against. As an industry, we're up against people like Home Depot who don't carry furniture in their stores, but show it on their website and are actively through middle entities selling furniture through technology. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but
I think it's no. I think
story.
no. I think it's a great story. Jamie, what would you say briefly as far as a case study as well?
Yeah, we've had several examples. I'll kind of follow on with the frame or collection example as I gave with special orders. Is we've implemented tools in several clients where you walk the floor and how's this item turning, and why is this item on clearance? You have this item on clearance, and we've been to multiple stores where that item's on clearance because we have never sold that sofa as shown on the floor. And so once you pull all the data together and you pull it together as a full collection, in 3 cases, we have exact results in 3 different cases. That item that never sold ever on the floor as shown was their number 1 best-selling collection. And they had no idea. They had it on the floor as a sofa love, and they were selling it as a sectional.
Wow.
Nobody liked the color of that fabric, so they were special ordering a different fabric. And so they were not able to really look at their business that way, and they were just getting ready to clearance their number 1 best-selling collection in the whole store.
Awesome.
So, just a simple example on how powerful data can be and how it can completely change your business results.
Well, and we're going to leave. That's a great way to end. We're come up upon time, but fantastic couple of stories there at the end. I want to thank each of you so much for the insights. David McMahon, owner of Perform Now, I always enjoy having you on because you're fun and you come off the wall with stuff, and it's always not just entertaining, but also a lot of great takeaways. Jamie Winter with Furniture Mall of Kansas, as well as Tools to Win. We appreciate you being here. And Kevin Staples with Myers Holem. Appreciate you as well. Tons of insights, reminders, folks. This will be on myhfa.org/webinar for you to be able to watch in real time. I always like to wish everybody great sales, good health, and from all of us here at HFA, we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.